The other day, I was finishing up my new PC build, and near the end, I wanted to make sure that everything was working as it was. I went ahead and hit the power button, and the CPU fan quickly spun up, but then also just as quickly spun down, and the light in my eyes died as quickly as the power LED. I started running through some possible scenarios of why the PC wouldn't boot, such as an accidental short circuit, perhaps a faulty cable. Unfortunately, debugging this scenario involved disassembling the build and really starting from the first principles, such as testing the PSU for faults, as well as booting with only the motherboard and CPU power cables attached. Eventually, I was able to nail the root cause down to the SATA power cable. By eliminating this part of the build and replacing it, I was able to boot successfully. But now the BIOS wasn't showing my SATA device I was expecting. What's going on? I investigated further and it started to indicate that the SSD was now completely dead. A stupid faulty cable. But does this reasoning really make much sense? The cable was new and really didn't show any obvious signs of damage that could have killed an SSD. And then I noticed something. The wiring of the cable seemed a little bit odd. The way that the wires crisscrossed before entering the 6-pin socket looked awfully non-standard. And then it occurred to me, I had mixed up my Corsair modular cables with my new Silverstone cables when sourcing parts for the build. If you're unaware why this might be a problem, here is a Corsair SATA power cable, and here is a Silverstone SATA power cable. Notice how the pins are arranged differently? As it turns out, PSU manufacturers take a standardized Molex 6-pin connector and then wire them up however they choose. Of course, this has disastrous side effects of damaged parts if someone dares to mix up power cables from different manufacturers. Digging even further into this, we can actually figure out what exactly killed the SSD. Here you can see the pinout of the Corsair cable on the left and the Silverstone on the right. Since we are plugging the Corsair cable into the Silverstone PSU, the actual delivered voltage looks a little more like this. Here we can see that the cable delivers actually 3.3 volts and 5 volts to the ground or common connection, which would ultimately destroy the SSD controller. Luckily, it didn't end up more expensive than just replacing an SSD.